What is the most pointlessly irritating thing your neighbor has done? Came home from middle school one day to find my neighbor and a few arborists cutting down our, probably, 100+ year old oak tree in our backyard. This guy let them believe it was his house and lem tell you they were pee when they found out he lied to them. His reason? Some of the branches hung over his property line. In the end we sued him and made him pay to have an old oak uprooted and transported from a nearby site. So he ended up paying for the arborist fee and a tree relocation, which are both quite expensive. Total butthole. Dang. Where I'm from, messing with trees is no joke. Treble damages and attorney fees. She's a county health inspector that used her weight to get the cops out of my house on a made up allegation that I had her in the lab. The police don't listen to her anymore. Sounds like you have good cops where you live. I live at the end of a cul-de-sac and my freaking neighbors keep parking their big butt truck in front of my mailbox. The mail carrier won't deliver my mail if he has to get out of his car and walk around it. We've asked them nicely to stop doing it, and they do. For a few days, their driveway is packed full of vehicles all day long, but they never park in front of their own mailbox. I don't know what else to do about this. You should park in front of their mailbox until they realize how annoying it is. My wife and I decided to have a new house built in one of those sprawling developments in the suburbs about 8 years ago. Decided on a lot on a street where most of the other houses were already built and occupied to avoid years of construction from future houses. Picked a nice lot with a neighbor on each side. The builder goes out to start grading the property when the problems start. Lets us know that the neighbor had sodded about 10 feet onto what is technically our property and had a fit when they tore it up to build. No biggie I think. A simple mistake by a guy with an open lot next to him. Couple months later, when construction is done, meet said neighbor for the first time and instantly recognize this is going to be an ongoing issue. He mentions that some landscaping in his front yard encroaches onto our property. It is some rock, plants and his mailbox. I tell him it is cool and if he wants, I can have my contractor take out his mailbox post and put in a double post so we can share the landscaping. It looks nice and I want to get off to a good start with new neighbor. Comes time to put mailbox post in and contractor lets me know that the post will be a good 8 feet onto my property. So I tell him to put in a nice walnut wood post and stain it dark to match our house trim since it is clearly in my yard. Real fun begins. Day after post is installed, neighbor asks if he can paint the post white to match the trim of his house. I tell him no. If he wants a white post to move his landscaping and his mailbox post onto his property. If it is on my property, it makes sense to match my house since I paid for it. It goes on for years. Him asking to paint the post and whining how it doesn't match his trim. I tell him over and over again that he has a solution in him installing his own post and moving the landscaping if it bothers him so much, but he doesn't want to do that. We go on a family vacation for a couple weeks and come back to my mailbox post painted white. I didn't get mad. I didn't go confront this guy. I did what any good passive aggressive person would do. I went down to the hardware store and bought red paint and painted a barber pole onto our shared mailbox post. He moved his landscaping and put in his own mailbox post. He might be trying to encroach in order to later make a claim that it's his land since he's maintained it. I don't know the legal word for it, but I know it's a thing. I have a group of incredibly petite girls living above me. There's 4 of them. Everything should be fine, right? Nope. It sounds like they do amateur wrestling upstairs with how much slamming and crap goes on at all hours of the day night. I knocked a few times but nobody ever answered the door. Finally ran into one of them and asked that they just chill out. I'm really lenient with noise because it doesn't bother me, but I'm after having pictures fall off the wall and everything. She's super nice and understanding and tells me to come up if there's more problems. The stomping hasn't stopped 3 months later. They never answer the door. If they leave in a group they yell at me through my door or window and ask if they're being quiet enough. Like, come on, really? I have a neighbor who sued someone down the street because she broke her arm when her dog went and tried to attack the neighbor's dog. She fell down when the leash was whipped from her hand and broke it. Apparently she blamed the other dog for merely being there and provoking her dog, instead of blaming her own dog that has a history of violence and has done this type of crap before. And the rage begins. When my husband and I were in the beginning stages of clearing out the house we bought and undergoing renovations, we rented one of those large dumpsters. We came by one day to find the dumpster had been filled with someone else's trash, namely beer bottles, as well as our trash cans missing. Turns out our neighbor took it upon himself to not only clean up using our dumpster as his own, but to also use our trash cans to bring his loads of trash over. Luckily that family moved not too long after. This is actually a very common occurrence. I work at a construction firm and we still have problems with this stuff with our dumpsters on sites. No amount of signage will ever fix that. People see a closer dumpster and assume they can use it. Those things cost a lot and we only figure for maybe 1 or 2 30-yard dumpsters, most common size. I live in a maisonette. The guy downstairs has a sensor that detects when someone is by their door and plays a dog bark on a loop. It's a very short loop and is obviously recorded. For months I won't hear it and then he puts new batteries in it. The real problem is, it's super sensitive. It can detect me through the wall. I walk downstairs. Error. The wind blows. Error. Fox is in the garden. Error. Toilet flush. Error. And so on for months. Then I get used to fake dog. It becomes a part of life. One day I notice fake dog has gone. Then one day, about 3 months later, error. I have a neighbor who will walk outside while I am in the middle of cutting the grass to yell at me until I stop the lawnmower and then simply ask, "What are you doing?" My neighbor blocked in 5 other apartments with her car because her spot was unavailable. Only one person could park in front of the apartments because 2 cars would block in everyone. My car was parked in front while I was home for a quick lunch. My neighbor decided to park in front too, effectively blocking everyone inside the complex. Sure enough, a guy got trapped inside and was frantically honking to try to get someone to move. I moved and then I went over to her apartment to explain that only one of us could park in front at a time. She said, "I don't give a crap what you do, but I'm parking in front because I've lived here longer." When I told her that wasn't an appropriate argument for affecting people's abilities to leave, she slammed the door in my face. This happened maybe 5 times. To get back at her, for the next 2 years I would remove one of her Christmas light bulbs to make the strand malfunction. I did it like 12 times. It made me feel good. Don't remove the bulbs. Pull one, clip the leads, and put it back in. My bull went on her lawn, so I walked on the grass to get it. She called the cops. I was 6 years old. I hope you learned your lesson in prison, scumbag. In my apartment complex, each unit has 2 parking spots in front of it, albeit they were unmarked spots. My building was working fine with each of us using our allotted 2 spots until a new tenant arrived. He and his girlfriend had 3 cars, 2 work trucks and her sedan. Now, we told him that each unit only has 2 spots for cars and to only use those 2 spots. He said okay and the first week was fine. Then they started taking up one of my neighbor's spots, which pushed my neighbor into my spots if they got home before us. We went to the new tenant and reiterated the 2 spot per unit rule. He said that he has to keep his work trucks close by at all times, so we told him to either move his personal truck or her sedan to the free parking the next lot over. He said that his personal truck was too nice to leave a lot away, so we told him to leave her car over there. He said he didn't want her walking an extra couple hundred feet, so he kept parking there, and so begun our parking war. I'd get home early and they'd all still be in the same spot from the morning. As I bumped into him at the mailbox, I asked if they ever work. He said, "Yeah, my co-worker comes and picks me up every day." Can you believe this guy? We had to get management involved since he wouldn't surrender our parking spot. He said if he can't have 3 spots then he'll leave. Our apartment manager said, "No, we don't want that. You can have your 3 spots." She then told me to find another lot to park in. I've lived here for 2 years prior to this moving in. I'm not giving up my spot. He finally moved out of my spot one day. My wife called me at work. I came home immediately and parked there and rode my bicycle back to work. So to sum up, my wife and I left our cars there and I rode my bike to work. He got so mad that he had to park a lot over that he broke his contract and moved away. Californian here. Our drought has been going on for a while, and just as it is clear that we need to conserve water, we came home one day to see our neighbor using our water hose to water the side of his front yard that bordered our property. It wasn't so much that he used the water, it's that he never asked us, or even when we caught him he just put it down and went back onto his side. No hi or thanks or anything like that. Had a similar experience with my new neighbor. We have well water, so when you use water here it runs our pump in the well house. Come home to find a hose running from our garden faucet to our new neighbor's newly filled pool. Also, our pump was burned out and didn't work anymore. Neighbor's ex-GF repeatedly poured bleach at the base of our royal palm tree till it died. It wasn't even over their property, and fronds would land on our driveway. Guess she didn't like it. He, great guy, millionaire, wound up dumping her and marrying a fantastic woman. Happy for him. My neighbor stood in his front yard watching my house burn. I was in the backyard, and through a series of crazy events my house porch caught fire. I didn't notice because I was in the back. We have about an acre. I look up to see smoke coming from the front yard, so I start running to the front. I come around the corner and my porch front corner of my house is on fire, and I see my dumb frick neighbor standing in his yard drinking a beer. I grab my phone and call 911. Then grab the garden hose and start spraying the porch house. A couple minutes later it's out. Wasn't a huge fire but big enough. The fire department shows up and blah blah blah. Anyway, that sucker stood there and watched my house burn. He was even posting pictures and making funny remakes on Facebook while it was happening. And that's just one of my neighbors. My neighbors had a small fire in their front yard. I know they were home. I called and banged on the door. No answer. So I used our hose and put it out. Buttholes still call the cops if I don't mow my lawn every week. Practice with his band on their balcony at 3 AM. They weren't even any good. They only did it 3 times though, because that's how many noise complaints it took to get you evicted there. I have a large hickory tree on the border of our property. I raked up the autumn leaves and went slightly over the line since I felt responsible for the leaves on her lawn. Next day there are sticks poking up from the ground with those nylon colored ribbons tied to them about every 6 inches. They are ugly. There's probably an alternate universe where you didn't rake the leaves on his neighbor's lawn and had some equally passive aggressive thing happen to him. I had a neighbor who loved his van and his lawn more than life itself. We had just moved in next door and I had my 2-year-old in the front yard, toddling around while I watched. My son started toddling toward my neighbor's van, which was parked in his driveway right next to my yard. I didn't think anything about it, knowing I could grab my son if he got too close. The neighbor's 2 kids came running out of the house yelling that I couldn't let my son touch their dad's van or he would be really mad. I didn't understand at first, so I said something like his hands are clean. And they said no. If my son even breathed on the van their dad would go crazy. The guy would lay down on his lawn and trim errant pieces of grass that grew faster than the others with a pair of scissors. I'm not joking. Unbeknownst to us, these neighbors gave our phone number to their security service. One night, the service called us and said the alarm was going off. We went outside to check it out just as the cops pulled up. We explained we didn't have keys to their house and couldn't turn the alarm off. After the cops made sure there was no break-in, they spent 15 minutes looking at the guy's lawn with their flashlights, commenting on how perfect it was and how they'd never seen such perfect grass. I warned them not to walk on it. The guy also trained his 2 German shepherds to do their business on a strip of grass that was 18 inches by 4 feet. Once a month, he'd pull up this strip of grass and lay down new sod. That guy was wound up pretty tight. I feel so bad for his kids. Their house must be a museum. Arrived drunk with friends at 3-4 AM on a Tuesday, and since they don't own a home sound system, decide the most logical thing to do is to park outside, open all car doors and blast crappy Mexican corrido music so they can still listen to it while drinking inside their house. He's done it twice. First time the guy's grandma came out after a half hour, after several people argued with him to turn it off, and shut down music with him loudly protesting inside the house. We could hear him. Second time I called the cops, who told him to shut up and gave him a warning. I still can't understand how a grown man can be so oblivious to the idea that his behavior can affect and annoy others. There is also the fact that you can buy a basic sound system for your home at a pawn shop for like $20 or less. My parents' neighbor would use humane traps to catch squirrels so he could drown them later in his rain bucket. Like, WTF Jerry? Cutty, take a minute to consider your achievement. I once told you about a squirrel who drowned. Jerry, yes. He said it was like going home. Cutty, I lied. He said it was agony. I had an Indian guy live in the apartment above me who danced by himself to weird Indian techno music at 2-3 am. I could hear him jumping up and down for about an hour above my head. It didn't really bother me at all. Tunak ton da da da. My neighbor's youngest daughter is constantly throwing trash into my yard. We have caught her in the act a few times and called her out on it, but she shuts the door in our face or denies it. Their family has a lot of domestic abuse issues also and has the cops called to their house at least 6 times a year. It's a shame really. Emptied the magazine of his handgun by firing it from his balcony in our residential complex, which is in a college town. This wins for most dangerous. My neighbor at the time was a campground for kids. Typically a group of kids would walk by my house every day with their camp supervisor, proceed to look in my mailbox, take out my mail, open it, and throw it on my lawn. Called the camp to complain so many times, I just gave up. So many missing Netflix DVDs, many missed bills. He would sit in his launcher on his driveway and watch me wash my car on my driveway, which was like 2 feet over. No words were exchanged. I had neighbors who would regularly pass out in their open garage after partying all night with their country music blasting. I was a few houses down, but their next door neighbors had a newborn at this time. When the neighbors filed a noise complaint on them, loud neighbors put a freaking Confederate flag in their yard. The neighbors with a baby were black. Same neighbor would regularly hit on my husband when I wasn't home. They were like mid-40s with a young child. Not the couple you would expect to be behaving this way. Loud neighbors put a frickin' Confederate flag in their yard. My wife and I have an authentic Soviet flag. We totally fly it if someone nearby started up with the stars and bars nonsense. My neighbor prefers to use his backpack blower to clear snow from his driveway. I have no idea why, because he owns a nice snow shovel and a snow blower, either of which could clear his entire driveway in less than 10 minutes. Instead he paces up and down his driveway with this thing the entire time snow is falling. He will just walk up and down his driveway for hours, clearing the light dusting that has accumulated since he last walked over the area 15 seconds prior. He has some sort of OCD about snow touching his driveway for more than 3 seconds, I guess. It's pretty annoying to hear him running that thing for 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon. It's infuriating when he's out there at 3 am on a Tuesday. Picking fruit off our trees without asking and always getting caught. We could care less about the fruit, but it's so awkward when we leave the house and run into her standing there looking all guilty. Ooh, my neighbors are fun. This is pretty mildly irritating, but they're persistent. For the past 8 or so years, they've been blasting a high-pitched frequency, the mosquito tone if you remember that, to ward off small children and animals from their lawn. Every time I'm outside, or open a door or window, I hear it blaring. One time, it stopped, and I wondered if I'd finally lost the ability to hear those frequencies. Unfortunately not, because it returned the next week. They are very protective of their property, and are constantly compulsively cleaning their lawn. On Christmas, they put up a crazy amount of decorations in their front yard, with lights and inflatables covering every inch of lawn space, and whenever people stop to admire it they chase them away. The kicker is that usually they're inside when this happens, but they also have cameras all over their property which they seem to be monitoring constantly, so whenever someone comes too close they run out of their house and yell at them. If you play the same noise a few milliseconds after it, it'll cancel the noise out due to phase cancellation. Sorry, I am an audio nerd. I had a neighbor that was a real pain in the butt for a while. He was a single guy living alone in a 2-story house. He never took any care of his lawn, and he left his Pitbull alone and unattended in the backyard for days at a time. This was the biggest problem of all. I know Pitbulls aren't inherently mean animals, but this one was neglected for days on end while this guy was God knows where. So at night it would howl and howl and howl non-stop. Then whenever we would walk by the fence it would bark and charge the fence. trying to break through it. Eventually it literally clawed its way through the fence, jumped into our pool, and attacked the pool vacuum had to be replaced. Expensive. The guy wasn't home to get his dog, so I had to watch it for an hour. He took the dog back and agreed to pay for the pool vacuum. However, he refused to fix the fence. So almost weekly his freaking dog would break through whatever weak bamboo tacky crap he used to patch it up and go hunting for pool vacuum. Eventually we paid to have the whole fence torn down and rebuilt. Heavy duty. The guy didn't pay his half. But whatever, at least his dog doesn't get in anymore. I should note that I've played with the dog a bit and it's really sweet. It's just bored and lonely back there. It's been several months since this was an issue, and the guys moved a girlfriend and her sons in. Now that someone's home to watch the dog and care about the lawn, they aren't so bad. Good for you for not hating on the dog. At a previous house, one neighbor had her lawn mowed twice a week and bagged all the clippings. There were lots of trees on her property and she would pick up all the leaves, daily, by hand. She wondered why her grass looked terrible and blamed the tree roots. Lady, you have cut it way too short and then taken away all the nutrients from your grass. Chopped a tree down. It fell over the property line and they didn't tell us or ask us, which is common courtesy. Then they didn't clean up their freaking brush. Honestly, that's all that pisses me off. I don't care, it fell in our yard. Clean up your mess, you animal. We had a pretty odd old lady living next to us when I lived with my parents, and she had an unhealthy obsession with her cat. My area had quite a lot of other cats, and there was a ginger cat from down the road that was king of the block and would come take all the other cats' territory. So anyway, this old lady's precious kitty used to get all upset when the ginger cat was around, and my neighbor used to knock on our door telling us to get involved in her campaign to rid our village of this stupid cat. One day, I woke up fairly early, wanting to get a lift to a friend's house from my dad, and I look out my window and see the crazy old bee stood there in our back garden, freaking about with the tool shed. I go outside to find out what's going on, and she's screaming some crap at the door. I go over and I'm like, what are you doing with our shed? And turns out she's locked 3 cats in our shed, holding them at ransom together. My cat, this butthole ginger cat, and her own cat. The cats are just sitting there chilling, not really knowing what's going on. My fruitcake neighbor turns to me and tries to tell me that this cat is a stray that's been abandoned. We knew the owner, and that I should get in her car with her and take it to the nearest town and dump it at a vet. So anyway, my dad gets up, talks some sense into the woman, and the cats are freed. When we looked into the shed, there were 2 big steamy piles of cat crap sat there, which we had to clean up. This is one of the many stupid things this old lady has done to us, and by far not the worst, just the weirdest. TLDR. Crazy neighbor locked 3 cats in our tool shed. Hatches plan to kidnap one of them and abandon it and try and involve me as her sidekick in this stupid adventure. Cats crap in the shed and I have to help clean it up. Other insanely annoying acts include pee off and insulting our oil delivery drivers so much some have refused to come back, building a wall at the end of our drive without our permission in order to stop vans from being able to get in to turn around. Not that it would be her freaking problem anyway. The woman did it when we went on holiday for 2 weeks and conveniently forgot we had a 4WD, so couldn't get in. We had to knock it down, parking her car in the middle of our drive for no reason even when she has her own, coming into our garden and doing stuff to our trees and plants, stealing our cat for days at a time for no reason. The list goes on. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.